The war on talent has begun. Is your organization ready for it? Tune in right now on The Leadership Voice. Welcome to The Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show, we're helping businesses prepare for the war on talent, which is forcing businesses, large and small, to recruit, retain, and train top talent at an unprecedented pace. Join us today to discuss this issue are three top human resource executives that head up the HR function at their companies. Jay Scott of H&S Ventures, Regina Johnson of Western Assets, and Scott Sherman of Ingram Micro will be joining us. It should be a great day, so let's start things off with today's quote of the day. Today's quote of the day comes from Indra Nooyi, CEO of PepsiCo. We want to create an environment where every employee can bring their whole self to work and not just make a living, but also have a life. Our first guest today on The Leadership Voice is Jay Scott. Jay Scott has over 35 years of HR experience in hospitality, entertainment, and multimedia companies, including Hilton Hotel Corporation, the Tribune Company, and the Walt Disney Company, where he oversaw the opening of Tokyo Disney Sea theme park and 2 Disney brand hotels in over 13 years with that company. Jay Scott is presently the Chief Human Resource Officer for H&S Ventures, which owns and operates the Arena, the Honda Center, as well as the Anaheim Ducks, an NHL hockey franchise, and also has several rinks throughout Southern California. In 2013, he was nominated for the Human Resources Executive of the Year by the National Human Resources Association. Scott serves on the Board of Advisors for the Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton, and also for Taller San Jose Hope Builders and the YMCA of Orange County. Please welcome Jay Scott. Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me here, Jay.
It's great to have you. So maybe we could start if you could share some of the major HR roles that you've had up to this point.
Thank you. Be happy to. So yeah, I've been fortunate to work for some organizations, as you said in the introduction. Hilton Hotel was my first intro to HR back out of college. Was just really fortunate to work in various roles with them, opened 2 hotels with them. They moved me around Southern California. From there, I was moved on to Walt Disney Company, as you mentioned. Again, probably the best organization to learn HR from, I think, in the country, honestly. Spent 13 years with them. And my last role with them was overseas at Tokyo and with the Tokyo Disney Resort expansion. So I got to oversee the Tokyo Disney Sea theme park as well as 3 hotels that we opened up at the same time. Moved on from there to the Tribune Company, which was ownership at the time of the Los Angeles Times. Worked in various HR roles with them. Also spent some time in New York with Tribune. Was the opportunity to come back to Los Angeles with them. And now I'm in my current role, as you mentioned, with H&S Ventures, really the holding and parent company of the Anaheim Ducks, Honda Center, and various rinks that we operate as well.
Oh, wonderful. So, and you've been here in your current role for 9 years?
That's correct.
Oh, terrific. So maybe we can go to our next question, which is perhaps you could talk about the importance of talent management and the importance of recruiting and retaining top talent.
Well, I think obviously human resources, that's our main role, right? Talent management, human capital management is another term that's used. And that's finding, retaining, and holding on, retaining those top people that you can find. It's a challenge. It's a challenge depending on the environment that you're working in, depending on your corporate culture. How do you find that right fit, right? So we spend a lot of time on determining what our culture is and who's successful in our organization, and then how do we get others that fit that same culture and that same background.
Now, there's a lot of retirements starting to happen really all over Southern California. It's really happening all over the country. But how are the impending boomer retirements, how is that impacting things at H&S Ventures?
Well, we're not a Disney from a standpoint of a lot of bench strength, right? We're not as big as those other organizations. So for us, we do have people in our C-suite, right, or executives that are in that boomer generation, and they are looking at retirement, as you said. Some would like to work sort of past that general retirement age, which is great, but we spend a lot of time finding out from them what's their plan, one, and then two, are they developing people to potentially replace them internally, or are they out identifying people maybe outside our organization that could potentially use their place? So we spend quite an amount of time and energy around looking at that so that we can continue to be successful as an organization going forward.
Oh, wonderful. So how important is it then at the Honda Center, and even for other organizations, to develop C-level executives?
Well, it's critical. Obviously, I think everyone in your organization is important to you. Our employees that are on the front line, if you come to Honda Center to an event or a Ducks game, for example, they're important. They're interacting with our guests and our fans. On the other hand, who's making the decisions in the organization are obviously those executive level, C-level employees. So it's critical to find and develop that talent that can, again, continue your organization to be successful into the future.
And so how do you balance developing talent, developing those executive leaders versus recruiting and finding and hiring those executives?
Great question, Jay. That's, I think, the thing that we think about a lot is who do we have internally? And if they're high potentials, as we try to identify those, how do we give them the experience and the knowledge and the expertise that they might not have now to take it to that next level? But we also recognize, again, that we don't have a ton of bench strength, so there's times where you need to go externally and find those people that already have that experience that can come right in, hit the ground running, and again, help you to be successful as an organization.
Oh, that's great. Now, you've had 35 years of HR experience. So over that time, I'm sure you've had a lot of opportunities for successes, opportunities for learning opportunities. As you look at things in totality, what is your philosophy in terms of how organizations should approach recruiting, retaining, and developing their talent?
Well, I think one of the things that you got to really step back and look at, again, what is your culture? And culture's, behaviors, and how do people swim in that organization, right? Where are the salmon swimming, so to speak, and understanding what that is. Now, it doesn't mean you can't change that culture, and you may need to change the culture, but if you feel like you have a pretty successful organization, you've got to just spend a lot of time thinking about that first, and then how do you bring people into that, again, will fit. And I don't mean to have it just a perfect fit in that, because you do want other ideas, right? You don't want to just think, oh, we used to do it this way and that's the way we want to do it in the future. So you need to balance people that fit your culture, but also want to bring you good ideas and new thoughts and processes maybe into your organization.
Oh, that's a great philosophy, and I want to thank you, Jay, for being on the show today, sharing your wisdom and experiences. You're gonna be back to help us with Q&A in just a little while, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Jay.
And now it's time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from quantumlearn.com. The American Society of Training and Development estimates that U.S. companies in the past 5 years have spent upwards of $800 billion on training and development. But leadership development only accounted for 13.5% of that figure. This means that upwards of 86% of all dollars spent on training focus on tasks and processes. Consider this investment in light of the fact that when asked about the most pressing issues facing organizations, a whopping 62% of human resource professionals say recruiting, developing, and retaining top talent is their highest priority. It's now time for today's Leadership Countdown. Today's countdown aligns with the theme, leadership and talent development. It comes from HR Trend Institute, as we at the Leadership Voice give you the 8 talent management trends for 2018. Trend number 1, a focus on today, not on the future. Instead of focusing on talent management interventions that have, hopefully, a long-term effect, such as traineeships and development programs, Organizations focus on interventions that have an effect today. Some examples: remove the blocker in the management team and appoint one of your top potentials instead. Or appoint one of the biggest talents as chief digital officer. Or give teams of high potentials responsibility for the development of new markets. Or don't hesitate to put your best people on the most important jobs. Trend number 2, from a standard to an individual approach. The most important trend in HR is individualization. Today, it is no longer necessary to make assumptions about what people need and want. The older employees need this. In consumer marketing, the individual approach is becoming very common. The way organizations treat employees is lagging. Employees are more and more expecting the type of experience that they, as consumers in the workplace, experience. In talent management, a tailored individual approach is very important. If you know what the capabilities of people are, what their wishes are, and in what direction they want to develop, you can design opportunities that fit best with the individual needs and wishes. With the technology of today, you are able to know your employees better than they know themselves. Trend number 3 is blurring boundaries between internal and external. There is a talent everywhere. Organizations limit themselves unnecessarily if they focus too much on developing and retaining the talent on the payroll. You can make your talent pools larger if you include talent elsewhere, at suppliers and partners, in the group of alumni, the self-employed professionals who work for your organization. These are just examples. Trend number 4, performance consulting. Good people want to become better. Performance consulting is the practice to help people to become better by helping them with regular and granular feedback based on real performance. Helping top performers to become better is not easy. In fact, it's a lot easier to give someone with average performance some guidance on how to improve their performance. And trend number 5, organizations are putting a greater focus on teams. Most of the HR practices, including talent management, are still very focused on individuals. At the same time, teams are the major building block in most organizations. Developing and strengthening talent teams is still an underdeveloped practice, but will get more attention in the coming years. Trend number 6, the talent experience is important. On Twitter, there's a hashtag that says, "My first day." People post photos of their first day in the new job, a photo of a nice clean desk with a great computer setup and some flowers, or a photo of the nice lunch with the new team. The employee experience better be nice. People like to share experiences, and the more positive experiences they share via social media, the better for the employer branding. Trend number 7, organizations are taking more of an organic approach to talent management. Most talent management programs cost a lot of money and do not deliver on the high expectations. But those closest to the work are likely most in position to assess needs and target improvements and development. The one-size-fits-all approach to talent development is being replaced by customized, relevant training. And finally, talent management trend number 8. More than ever before, the talent analytics are becoming the foundation of talent management practices. Talent analytics is the foundation of all talent management initiatives. The most important talent management trends can be implemented as they are fueled by talent analytics. Can you quickly make a match between the urgent opportunity and the available talent in your organization? Are you able to track the engagement of key players in real time? If not, then you need to invest more in your organization's talent analytics. And by the way, the Center for Leadership can help you with this with our Bringing Solutions to Work initiative. And that, viewers, has been your Leadership Countdown. Follow these 8 trends and your organization will be better prepared to meet today's demands for talent management. Stick around, we have Regina Johnson in the studio, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Well, we found here at Honda Center in the Anaheim Ducks that the Center for Leadership brings expertise in doing research, in doing training. The faculty that has come and given the training to our employees does all the research themselves. They're not pulling this information off the shelf. They're out there researching themselves, talking from firsthand experience, and it brings such a level of competency that we, again, don't find from other trainers that are on the market.
Well, simply put, is what really differentiates and distinguishes Fullerton and the Center for Leadership, really is your expertise. You guys are able to create customized content for our business based on true research.
The faculty from Cal State Fullerton, obviously they're professors of their field. They have deep knowledge and research, but also, aside from the theory, they really bring in some practical examples, and they bring in a lot of interactive activities.
The Bringing Learning to Work initiative is our way of meeting the needs of Orange County businesses and communities. When our clients ask the Center for Leadership to come to bring learning to work, the clients know that they're getting cutting-edge information, the latest thinking in the field, but they're also getting world-class training. Welcome back to The Leadership Voice. Our next guest today on The Leadership Voice is Regina Johnson. Regina Johnson brings more than 18 years of experience in global human resources with specific industry experience in financial services, technology, and data analytics. Regina has served as the global head of HR for Western Assets since 2017. As the global head of human resources, she oversees all aspects of human capital management for the firm. Prior to joining Western Assets, Regina had a senior vice president role at Spirion, a VP role at CoreLogic, and an HR manager role at Bank of America. She is a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, and also earned an MA in organizational management. She has been an advisory board member for the Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton since 2014. It is with great pleasure to welcome Ms. Regina Johnson.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
Regina, it's so great to have you on the show to share your experience and wisdom with our guests.
It's a privilege to be here.
So maybe we can start off by you sharing a little bit about your HR journey and the different roles that you've had in HR.
Absolutely, and I will tell you, similar to other HR professionals, I was not someone who studied in human resources in my undergraduate education. I actually studied psychology and fell into HR. So my first point of entry was in recruiting, and I had the privilege of working at Bank of America, doing professional as well as university recruiting. And from there, had a variety of other specialty roles in the organization in terms of leadership development, as well as human resources business partner roles. And after that, working at Bank of America for not quite 9 years, I moved to a company called CoreLogic, which is a data and analytics company, specializing in real estate and other property management types of analytics. And I was there for about 6 years, supporting various parts of the business, including also talent management functions, talent acquisition functions, diversity, inclusion, and corporate social responsibility. After that, I moved on to a technology company called Spirion, which deals with telematics, driverless car technology, which is a great and emerging new industry, and served as their head of HR for not quite 3 years. And then recently had the privilege of joining Western Asset Management as their global head of human resources.
And so you've had a chance to experience HR in a lot of different companies and different industries as well. And during that time, I'm sure you've started to develop a bit of some HR philosophies. So please talk about the importance of recruiting and retaining top talent, and especially if you could talk about the lack of C-level ready executives that we're seeing in the industry.
So within the industry that I serve today, within the asset management industry, we do have a challenge. And I would say across all industries, there is a war on talent in general. But specific within asset management, and I would say in financial services, we have seen a bit of a fall off and a lack of general interest. And we find that to be that there's less of a connection with individuals to what these firms do. But that provides a great opportunity, in my opinion, around how a company can make sure that they're connecting what they do and the value it brings, not only to the communities that they serve, but also to the people that they employ. So a lot of what our organization has been focusing on as it relates to attracting talent and developing and retaining talent has been to ensure that there's really true alignment within the organization, that there's a strong culture, and I would say Western Asset's culture is very, very strong. So our retention of our talent is actually pretty high, which we're very proud of. But we have an opportunity in terms of continuing to tout the message and attracting the talent. So touting our culture is one facet that's really important to us, but also connecting what we do and the positive impact that it has on the communities we serve is another facet that we believe is important in being able to attract talent into our organization.
So could you talk a little bit, Regina, about the distinction that we hear it a lot, but sometimes it's spoken about as if everyone already knows exactly what it means. Could you talk about the balance between buying versus building talent?
Sure, and those are, I would say, an HR term in terms of do you want to buy or build? And buying is simply put, bringing talent externally, let's say from a different company or an organization, from a different background into the firm, versus building, which is truly developing internal talent. I would tell you that most organizations that are successful have a balance of both in order to be able to effectively scale. At Western Asset, I think they've been very successful in terms of their building talent up. And again, I think that speaks to our retention numbers. But there are now opportunities as Western has continued to grow and diversify. There are new skill sets that we're bringing into the organization. And we know that we're going to need to be able to seed some of that talent in addition to the development strategy that we have in place. So for us, we always strike the balance of investing in our people while we're also looking at talent that's going to be able to fit into the organization's framework.
So if you were talking to a young HR professional that's going to be taking on more senior roles in the near future, and they were going to be taking on a lot of talent management kinds of activities, we're going to think about like what type of advice you might give them. So maybe you could share your philosophy of how organizations can continuously work to improve their recruitment, their retention, and their development of talent.
Well, what I would first say is I don't think there's a silver bullet, right, for every organization. But I think it really does start with understanding the business's vision, their overall goals, their culture, and general needs. You start with that, and then you tailor your programs around those offerings. So as an example, our organization puts a premium around collaborative environments and collaboration and teamwork, as well as high integrity. So as we think then about the talent we want to be able to bring into the organization and to develop, those principles are always going to be kind of core in how we put out our training programs, but more importantly, the kind of people we bring into the organization.
That's great information, and it's great advice for young HR professionals. I want to thank you, Regina, for being on the show. Now, we're going to have you back to help us with Q&A in just a little while. That is right?
That is absolutely right.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Jim.
It's now time for the Leadership Voices Leadership Example. Today's leadership example comes from the Center for Leadership. Every year, the Center for Leadership recognizes excellence in leadership development with its annual Leadership Awards. The Excellence in Leadership Development Award recognizes outstanding Orange County or Southern California organizations that have excelled in developing human capital, as evidenced by organizational policies and creative leadership development programming. Here are all the companies that have received this prestigious recognition. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest is Scott Sherman, a global HR and business leader in pharmaceutical, medical device, and technology industries with deep experience in rewards, executive development, and succession planning. He currently is the Executive Vice President of Human Resources for Ingram Micro. Prior to joining Ingram Micro, he was Executive Vice President of HR at Allergan and VP Global Rewards and HR Operations at Medtronic. He is a graduate of George Washington University and earned his master's in Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University. He gives back his time and talent with local nonprofits, as well as serving on the Center for Leadership's advisory board since 2012. He is a recipient of the National Human Resources Association HR Professional of the Year. It is with great pleasure that I welcome a great person and an amazing HR talent. Please welcome Scott Sherman.
Thanks, Jay. Good to be with you. Good to be with Jay and Regina.
Thanks for being on the show, Scott. I was really excited to have you on to share some of your wisdom and insights around HR and talent development.
Good to be here.
Maybe you could start by just giving a quick overview of your HR roles that you've had that leading up to where you are now.
You know, I would say that I'm generally a classically trained HR person. As you mentioned, I went to grad school and studied labor relations and then went right into HR. I started my career with Exxon and had, I guess, 7 assignments in 5 years. A couple of them were in sales. And I would say that the sales assignment was probably the best HR assignment in many ways because I got to be a customer of HR and also understand how the business operates. Went to Medtronic where I put together HR and sales and did HR for a sales organization, but also started branching out into some of the other things I didn't know, like compensation and benefits and rewards and things like that. Did some M&A integration work, led an HR function with an acquisition, went to Europe and lived there and ran international HR for Medtronic for a while before coming back into the last job I had there, the comp benefits and operations job, and work with the C-suite and the board of directors. And had learned enough to be a reasonable candidate to lead HR somewhere and had the good fortune of doing that at Allergan. And that was just a fabulous experience going from a mission-driven company like Medtronic to a equally mission-driven, passionate company like Allergan, and led that team for almost 5 years before we sold the organization, and then went to Ingram Micro, decided it was time to get out of healthcare for a bit, maybe forever, and went to work at Ingram Micro, which is primarily a technology distributor, logistics provider, cloud computing provider, and I've been doing that now for a few years. It's a much larger organization from a leadership standpoint. We've got 32,000 regular associates and another, depending on time of year, 15,000 folks that are also providing service to us.
Yeah, you've had an incredible journey. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of recruiting and retaining top talent, particularly in how it relates to perhaps the lack of C-level executive suite personnel in your industry?
Yeah, so let me start in general. And we talk about recruiting and retaining. I'm not sure that's the right order. I think if we're going to recruit well and effectively, we have to have the ability to retain folks. We have to have the ability to bring folks in to a career where they find value and have impact and want to stay. Otherwise, we're not retaining and we're only recruiting. So I've been thinking more lately that it's probably retaining and recruiting than it is recruiting and retaining. Mm-hmm. And that's really about providing an organization where folks and careers where folks can have an impact, where they find that they value the work they do and that the organization also values them and the work they do. When you go and you grow your career, I think there's 4 stages: learn, do, master, and teach. Mm-hmm. And so when you're in the C-suite, you're a teacher. And so what you're doing over the course of careers and career development is you're helping folks work up what used to be a ladder and is now a lattice. And you're helping people work up and across through these series of experiences that get them ready to be a candidate. And that's the most that I think any of us hope for. I think if you asked Jay and Regina or any of our peers, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people ready to be great candidates. And then we're putting the puzzle together and we're seeing which one fits the best. And so for us, it's about assessing talent all throughout the career stages and moving that talent around to where we think the skills are going to need to be most developed and most refined. So it depends on life cycle of organization. It depends on the other leaders present on the leadership team, what we may need to develop. So it's a particularly planful process, and it's not something that can be done through an assembly line. Right? There are 4 ways to develop careers. There's this linear job A to job B to job C approach. There's another approach, which is you have a great career, but there's probably no development. I refer to that as the dental hygienist's version of career development. It's a really important job. It's really necessary, but at my dentist's office, at least, there's no vice president of dental hygiene. And so what that dentist's office has to do is make it rewarding for that human being in that job. Then there's this really unplanned method. I'll date myself. It's sort of the spirograph method. Careers just go and happen and you don't know how. And then there's the method that you're referring to, which is just a really planful, thoughtful, individualized approach to career development. And that's what has to happen, especially at the top of the house.
Oh, that's great. So how important is it for organizations to develop talent, leadership talent from within, as opposed to always relying on searches for their executives?
Yeah, look, it's a puzzle. You've got to put it together. At the more entry levels of an organization, you're going to bring in more external talent. As you move up the funnel towards more senior level roles, you should reduce the percentage of external talent that you're bringing in. But it should never be zero. You always have to bring in a different perspective. You'll always miss something. Something will change with the makeup of the leadership team or what's necessary. But it should be a much smaller percent at the senior leadership levels than at the entry levels of an organization. And if it's not, it's indicative of either a lack of investment in development or in failed investment in development.
Could you talk a little bit about succession planning and some of your philosophy around succession planning and how you make sure that companies are ready?
So it's an interesting question.
If they're ever ready.
No, look, it's are we doing the right things to improve readiness, and are we looking far enough into the future to have a competent understanding of what we're going to need in 5 years and in 10 years? So if you have an organization of 30,000 and you've got one CEO and your turnover is 10 or 15% a year, and it takes you 15 years or 20 years to become the CEO, and you do the math on that, you need thousands of candidates at the entry levels that you think one day can become the CEO. You're not going to do succession planning at those levels. What you're going to do is you're going to create succession pools of high talent folks who you want to invest in, and experiences where you want to test in and test out. As you get to the more senior levels, that's where position succession planning comes into play. For us at Ingram Micro, that's around the VP level or around the country managing director level if that role is not a VP. Other than that, we try to focus more on succession pools, with the exception that there are some uniquely skilled positions where you're going to want to do individualized succession earlier.
And so a lot of what you do then is asking the right questions to the right people and saying where do we need to be, and what are some of those conversations? What do they sound like?
No, I think it sounds exactly like that, Jay. It's working with leaders so that they understand what are the right questions to ask and what are the right answers to the questions. So we don't interview every candidate. We don't make every selection decision. I'm not the chief HR officer at Ingram. The CEO is. Our business leaders are really the chief HR officers in their organizations. And so what we have to do is enable them with the right skills and abilities so they ask the right questions and so they can figure out the future for their organizations. There's too many for any one function to plan for. So our job is to make sure that our leaders have the skills to make sure that they've got the right people in the right place at the right time with the right motivations, et cetera. That's our job. And it starts at interviewing, right? Do we have the right folks engaging with candidates that know what great looks like and understand what great actually is when they sit across the table from it? That's the job.
So if we were to have a chance to talk to a young HR professional, a person that's going to be getting into the talent management space, and you were asked to articulate your philosophy of talent management, what advice would you give them, or what would you say if you were asked to sort of summarize what HR management and talent development and talent management really needs to look like for organizations to really be ready for the future?
Yeah, I think what we need to have, first, in HR, we don't manage talent. And let's be clear, talent manages itself. talent development is self-motivating as well as corporate entity motivating, and employment is a mutually selfish process. So we have to provide the systems and the tools and the processes that enable people to grow and leaders that can help them do it. But also we have to communicate what we think is necessary 3 years out, 5 years out, 7 years out. None of us can guess at what 10 years out is going to look like. So as an HR professional, you've got to get in and help organizations and associates facilitate those processes. And for me, it's, okay, what are the things you think you're going to need to know at some point in the future? And how can we get you some of those experiences, right? How can the next assignment prepare me by learning some of the things I don't yet know? HR folks have to provide the environments along with leaders to do exactly that in a really safe way where failure is an option, but a safe option.
Oh, terrific. I want to thank you so much for being on the
be
show
here.
and sharing your thoughts and wisdom with me. Scott, you're going to stick around for Q&A.
Absolutely.
It's going to be coming up here in just a minute. Hear that? You know what that means. It's time for today's leadership lesson. Are you ready to learn? Albert Einstein once said, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. Every show we bring you, our viewers, an opportunity to learn from a faculty expert with a concise 3-minute lesson. So without further ado, here is today's leadership lesson.
Hello, I'm Dr. Shaun Pichler, and here is today's leadership lesson. Today I'll be talking about some key ways that firms can maximize talent management. Talent management is more important today than ever before when it comes to gaining and sustaining competitive advantage in the marketplace. Jack Welch famously said that managing human resources is the most important business function because there's nothing more important than selecting who's on your team. There's no doubt that people make the plays, that high-performing individuals working together to solve complex problems is the backbone of high-performance firms. But what can firms do to ensure that they have the right talent and that that talent is being managed effectively? We've found that workforce differentiation is really the key, and this involves 3 key pieces. First, identifying strategically valuable positions. Second, identifying high performers or those with high potential. And finally, developing talent management systems to support high performance in those valuable positions. So let's first talk about those valuable positions. Strategically valuable positions are those that are important to the firm's strategy, to its implementation, to supporting a firm's culture, or those that have an ability to increase revenue or decrease costs. So for instance, customer service positions are especially valuable at Nordstrom, given their differentiation business strategy focused on exceptional customer service. And Walmart's buyers are especially valuable to them, given their price leadership strategy. Really, the simple point here is that it's important for firms to direct resources towards those positions that lead to the highest marginal return. Next, let's talk about identifying and retaining talent, again, which is high performers or those with high potential. Research actually shows that the top 1% of performers outperform average workers by 127%. Thus, it's imperative that firms have the processes in place to identify high performers, especially those in those valuable positions. The problem here is that executives consistently express that there's a scarcity of high performers. So one way to identify top talent is through effective recruitment and selection programs. It is essential that firms invest in rigorous selection systems. For instance, developing behavior-based structured interviews, realistic job previews, and utilizing employment tests like work sample tests and personality tests. These are all effective ways to identify top talent. And finally, let's discuss how to develop and retain that top talent. An effective way to retain top performers is to invest in them. That is, it's important to provide top performers and high potential individuals with resources and opportunities to develop firm-specific knowledge and skills. Such skills contribute not only to the value of the business, but they prevent talent from being poached. These opportunities could include formal mentoring programs, informal coaching systems, training development opportunities, and job rotations. To the extent that individuals develop firm-specific knowledge and skills, they're going to be more committed, higher performers, and less attractive to competitor firms as a source of labor. I'm Shaun Pichler, and this has been today's Leadership Lesson.
It's now time for the Leadership Voices Q&A. Do you need some leadership advice? Well, you've come to the right place. Every show we take questions from you, our viewers, and we answer them right here on the show. Today we have 3 questions, and our guests have agreed to stay on and help us answer these questions. So thank you, J. Scott, Regina Johnson, and Scott Sherman for taking the time out of your busy schedules and joining us for today's Q&A.
Thanks for having us, Jay.
Pleasure.
Yes.
Are we ready to go?
We are.
Sure.
All right, so question number 1. The first question is for J. Scott. It comes from Mackenzie in Hacienda Heights. Mackenzie asks, the new trend in business is for employees to move a bit more from job to job and company to company, much more so than in the past. Why should companies spend so much money on developing leadership if so many people will end up leaving the company? Aren't companies better off just hiring talent?
Well, Mackenzie, thanks for the question. And that's a very, very good question from that standpoint. I'd like to flip it around. How about the opposite? What if you don't decide to invest in your employees? One, then you're left as those people that want investment in themselves leave you. What are you left with from that standpoint? So I look at it a little bit like a hockey team. We happen to obviously be in the business. You have prospects that you hope will be good. You put them in the lower level leagues, the American Hockey League, and you develop them from there to then become top talent. You know that at some point they may leave you in that end, but during the time you have them, right, hoping that you might raise the Stanley Cup at the end of the season.
Okay, terrific. Regina?
Yeah, and I agree with Jay. I look at it in 2 facets as it relates to why make the investment. The first facet is that if you want your people doing your best work, give them the tools to do their jobs. So every job evolves real time. We see that happen regardless of position, tier. So equipping our individuals and developing them ensures that they're bringing their best selves and creating the most productivity environment. Now, the second aspect that I would also add is if you really want to think about the flip side of not doing it, these could be people who might also be your future clients of the company. If they leave the organization, they might actually purchase what you have. If you sell products or services, they might be a client longer term or know somebody who could be a client longer term. They want to have a positive experience while they're working for your organization. And investing in them definitely creates a facet of that positive experience.
Scott?
Yeah, Mackenzie's question is great. So Mackenzie, we're all going to leave companies from time to time. Every one of us, as you've heard, have done that. The question is, are we leaving for something that the company we're with can't provide? And if so, then leaving is a good thing. What's really important is when people do that with any of our organizations, that we stay in touch with them. After they've learned some of the skills that maybe we can't provide, we want to bring you back, Mackenzie. And so career is a whole life cycle that happens many times over, and it could go back and forth between companies, the same industry. So it's something that's always happened, and our job is to stay connected with you so that when you learn some of the things we may not provide, or when you grow in an accelerated way, we get to bring you back home.
Okay, terrific. All right, let's move to our second question.
Great.
Our second question comes from Sue in Seal Beach, California. Sue asks, how are companies fighting the war on talent? What must companies do to compete for top leadership talent?
That's a great question, Sue, and thank you for having me provide the answer. I think companies are thinking about the war on talent in a variety of ways. They're thinking about it in terms of what types of rewards or benefits do they want to offer, what type of experience do they want to provide their employees, what types of capabilities do they want to invest in order to retain people within their respective workforces. We're seeing a variety of ways in which that manifests itself. It could be something as, ping pong tables and, really interesting things that people do to kind of, create innovative environments. But it could also be something as simple as exposure to leadership and other types of investment programs on helping students pay off their loans. It happens in a variety of ways. And so what I would tell you is that companies are looking inward first to say, okay, what does it mean for us as an institution? What do we stand for? What do we subscribe to? What's going to be our culture? And where do we want to make those investments? And then that's what they're using to attract the best talent in. And those tend to find the best matches based on their business model.
Okay. Scott?
I would offer two things. One is that companies need to just display who they are in an authentic way. Right? We're all of us are different. Every one of our entities are different, and we should recruit and engage in the war for talent in just the most authentic ways. Otherwise, we have that retention problem. The second thing I'd offer is we're all using more technology these days. We look at recruiting, and folks can press a button and apply for roles, and it's different than ever before. What we have to remember is that the employment relationship is still personal, and we still have to engage personally. And if we have computers do work for us, we should make sure to do the non-automated work even more thoughtfully and more deeply. And I think that personal relationship, when created well, serves us all really well in the battle for talent.
Okay, terrific. Jay?
I agree, obviously, with what Regina and Scott both have shared. The thing we think a lot about, and other organizations are as well, is really what's the employment value and the employee value. And we talk a lot about giving back to the community, right? One of our values as an organization, and we happen to recognize that a lot of candidates want that in an organization as well. So for us, that just matches up almost, not on purpose, quite honestly, but it has worked, and people come to our organization because that's what we stand for a lot of times in the value. But we also recognize that they may not stay forever, and that's okay as well. If we have them for a period of time, and again, to Regina's comment, even if they don't join us initially, they might be a fan, they might want to come to one of our events, skate in our rinks, join one of our programs. So that's very important for us too. Just what is your brand out there into the community? And we're a local company as well. We're not worldwide, and so we can kind of focus Orange County based, which really helps us, again, attract that local talent.
Oh, terrific. So let's look to our third question, which is for Scott Sherman, and it comes from Zoe in Brea, California. Zoe asks, how has talent management changed from 5 years ago to today, and how might we anticipate what it will be like 5 years from now?
Thanks for the hard question, Zoe. you know, talent management is constantly evolving, and in the last 5 years, it's probably evolved most because of technology broadly defined. So it's the tools that we may use in the organization, but it's also the tools that our employees and our candidates and our societies use to share and exchange information. And so we just have to be more agile and more nimble than we ever have. We have to recognize that that careers aren't ladders anymore. They're lattices. They go up, they go over, sometimes they go down. And that's okay. It's about learning. It's about providing impact or the ability to impact. And then I would go to what I said in the last question. We just have to make sure that technology doesn't displace humanity at work. And I just think that trend's going to continue over the next 5 years. What will make it harder is that the boomers are starting to retire. And so we're losing this incredible wealth of information. And how do we replace it, and how do we grow on it? It's a tough job market out there if you're an employer looking for really skilled talent. It's very tough here in Orange County, as the OC Focus report recently demonstrated. And so that's just on us to continue to evolve and stay in touch with what you want from careers at any of our organizations.
Okay, Jay?
And to really piggyback, it's this generational, as Scott mentioned, boomers, leaving out what are the millennials, what do they value generally, right? There's always exceptions, and trying to understand that better, right? And what's the next generation after that? Understand. The 5-year question, who knows? Technology, right, is happening so quickly. How do we even stay ahead of that? And from a talent, from how do we engage with candidates and with our employees? We don't really even almost have the answers we sit here today, but the thing is thinking about that, right, and trying to stay focused and thinking about what's going to be the next thing down the pike. But it has gone very fast, right, and we all have experienced that, especially in the employment aspect. But we do a lot of thinking around, again, the different generations and what do they look for in an employer.
Okay.
And I would echo what Scott and Jay have said. I think the only thing I would add on really is the agility piece that Scott had mentioned, and the ability to be agile, faster, quicker, more efficient is going to continue to be very common, regardless of industry, regardless of position. the human skills, I think what Scott had also mentioned, becomes even more important in the work environment. So as technology continues to expand, become greater utilized across industries, it means the ability to have the complex judgmental thinking, decision making, the things that we humans do very, very best, are the skills that are going to continue to be very important in the future. And so what I would say is in the next 5 years, the ability to be resilient, to be a voracious learner, to also want to be somebody who can move within an organization in a lattice fashion, to what Scott had mentioned, I think will serve organizations, but I also think individuals as they think about their careers very well.
Thank you, the three of you, for joining us and helping us answer today's Q&A. If you have a question or need advice, you know what to do. Send us your questions here to the Leadership Voice by email, leadershipvoice@fullerton.edu, or contact us by Twitter, @CSUF_leadership. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today's show. Today we explored leadership and talent. Thank you to our guests, Jay Scott, Regina Johnson, and Scott Sherman. Join us each episode of the Leadership Voice as we will have more executive guests, another special leadership lesson, and lots more worth tuning in to see. I'm Jay Barbuto, and on behalf of the Center for Leadership, we'll see you next time right here on the Leadership Voice.